If you want to talk about that story and the idea of censorship with independent media versus maybe legacy media.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in that specific case, it was kind of interesting because the task that I gave to the students was working on the subject crossing the line in the context of a country with many religions and with like the UAE and with this kind of shifts between very traditional and very modern lives. And there are a lot of borders that you are allowed not to cross.
If the trust is cracked, where do we stand? Who keeps score when the facts land? This is media in the margins. Media in the margins.
So, for transparency, this podcast approaches journalism as a public evolving process rather than a finished product. We treat knowledge making as something that's developed through dialogue, not delivered as final authority. While we retain editorial control, our goal is to make parts of that process visible in its uncertainties, its limits, and its revisions over time. Corrections and updates will be documented in the show notes. For context, I'm currently affiliated with Oslo Met University in the Department of Photojournalism. This conversation is being recorded on
March 2nd,
2026. And with that, let's begin with the introduction.
Our guest today is Lars Harmsen, an award-winning German graphic designer, typographer, publisher, and co-founder of Slanted Publishers and the internationally acclaimed Slanted Magazine. He's a professor of typography and editorial design at Dortmund University of Applied Sciences and the Arts, where his teaching and research focuses on visual communication, editorial design, and contemporary design culture. I must also mention that we did work together briefly while we were both stationed at American University of Sharjah. So let's get into it.
can you give a little bit of how you would define independent creator journalism for yourself?
Well, first of all, it's not being part of a big publishing house that dictates the rules of how to make the journalism happen. Then for me, it's very much about having a total freedom and choosing the themes and being independent in the sense that we don't have any kind of advertisers who we have to respect. And that probably in many of the publications is the case, or in other publishing houses. Yeah, mainly that's it.
So then how do you make that workflow profitable for if you're not doing advertising? Like for people who are curious, how does that work?
So we have many sources of income. The one source is the subscriptions of our publication. Then the web itself sells advertisings, but independently. Then we have the distribution network of our publications worldwide. And then we co-finance a lot of our activities of Slanted Publishers also through book publications that we're doing by now. So it's like a revenue that comes from many little incomes here and there, I would say. It was not that at the beginning. At the beginning, it was just, just have to let the cat in. At the beginning, it was just, the magazine itself, but we had a super small print run. We were a very small team. So, but by now we're, 5 people in the company working. So, of course, we need more sources of revenue.
That makes sense. What I noticed that you have a podcast on YouTube.
Yes.
Is that something you haven't focused on or you're looking to do more of? What's the situation with that?
So as the content of what we're doing, especially when it comes to cities that we visit to cover the design scenes of those cities, means that we get in touch with important figures of design or of the cultural field. And by doing so, at some point we thought, well, it makes sense that beyond a physical meeting, we have video recorded interviews. And so we started to have these interviews with all the people that we met in the course of those past, let's say, 15 years on doing this activity. And interestingly, we never considered it to be something that we would monetize in a way. So we just have these interviews on our platform, knowing that here and there people use them for research, but basically it is each time the publication is being published and is brought to market that we promote those videos so that the reader could, on one hand side, discover the designers by reading the magazine, and at the same time go on the video channel and discover the interviews that we had with those people. It's also probably a strategic mistake that we did in the context that our website was not designed to have all these different activities on the day it was conceived. It was conceived as a blog. And in the growth that our company went through, it was like adding this and adding that and so on and so on. So this really important part somehow of now having over 250 video interviews with great people who, some of them even passed away, unfortunately, is a real, I would say, some gold nuggets are there, right? So, and we are just working on a new website where this part of our activities will be promoted more prominently in a way. I use here and there on some lectures, I take snippets out of these meetings that I add to the lectures because it's super interesting, of course. There are crazy good stories from people like Milton Glaser or Lars Wyman or Wolfgang Weingart. So there are a few designers who, as I mentioned, unfortunately passed away. And it's always nice to know that in the legacy of their work, somehow we have been there and have been together with these guys and had really nice moments talking about design and beyond design. I mean, most of the time in these interviews, there's much more being said between the lines that is more interesting than just talking design. So I think it's a great exercise.
Talking about design, have you noticed with all of the people you've interviewed in the magazines that you've developed or created that there's been a shift in how the idea of kind of the independent creator is supported or not supported, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but has there been a shift in?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that there are those designers who are totally aware that design is not a job where you could, make big money on. So unfortunately, the times like in the 80s where design was about being a successful designer and taking cocaine and having big parties, those times are over. So I think a few designers understood that it is, and I think it's also very different in different, the perspectives are very different according to the country and about which we are talking. In our German culture, it is, I would say, quite common that you could be a designer that works for commercial clients, advertising clients, and at the same time be in the field of art and at the same time be in the field of publishing. I think that in the field of publishing, it's extremely interesting to see that more and more we are talking about the authorship of designers, so that the designer understands himself more than just being an executive, but being a creator, being a content creator, and being the author of a magazine, a book, a review, a magazine, zine, or whatever, a podcast, and so on. And it has to do, in my opinion, a lot with democratization of the possibilities and tools that by now this job that we're talking about has been in the past a very specific job where many, many different people had to be like in a chain bringing stuff to be published. But nowadays it's kind of easy that you could sit in your kitchen and be a publisher because you have the printer online around the corner. And if you're smart, you even could, start the distribution channels in the same way as you would chose a printer online. So that, in my opinion, was a boost for the design scene in a way to have an other understanding of just being those who are executors. And I see a lot of works coming out from really super interesting, great offices where you clearly see the shift from having the understanding of being an author of your work and being the curator of something, right? So I think this is a new phenomenon that I see. At the same time, I see it that in other countries, for example, in France, it is not so evident that you really need to choose on which side of the river you are working. Are you the advertising guy or are you in the field of culture? And there are only very little bridges between these two worlds. And that is more like coming from let's say, a tradition or education system, or there are many reasons for that, right?
Yeah. I'm curious if we're talking about kind of blurry lines with the idea of journalism and you and the definition of who can be a journalist or what ethics you follow as a journalist. How, if I consider, your publications, you're the editor for your publication, do you consider yourself also a journalist or journalism, the work that you're publishing?
I would say more in the context of being author, not so much about, I think I'm not sure if we are really, I think that an investigate journalist would not consider the work that we're doing as journalistic. He would also always probably say it's just about being an author or a writing designer or whatever. Though I see in the context, especially of design, that yes, there are those who have a look at design from the perspective of design management or design thinking. I mean, it's even something that is being studied now, right? And in our case, we have more the approach of being just crazy curious about what is happening there and try to bring it to our audience through all the channels that we are serving. So from the social media channels to the blog, to the publications, to the events, to the lectures, to the TED Talks, to the podcast, to any kind of activities that we are having there. And by that, give a quite precise idea of what is happening out there in the field of design. I think we are also very much curators in the sense that we invite other people who have more journalistic background than we have to contribute to what we're doing. And by that involve also more journalistic approaches or more theoretical design approaches. And where our publishing house somehow becomes like a curating platform also for others to publish stuff that is super interesting. There I see a lot coming from also the academic background.
Yeah.
Probably that has also a little bit to do with the misunderstood concept that academic people, in order to have the opportunity to get to a higher level, need to go through these publishing craziness.
Yeah.
This is like
I'm familiar with that.
yeah. So this is like more like a system that also produces, of course, a lot of design theoretical approaches in a way. But I see a lot of or I talk to a lot of authors that we have about their projects and how can we involve them into our publications. And by that, yes, we are very journalistic.
Yeah. I think, well, even your recordings and documentation of all the interviews to me is very transparent and documentary like in a very, maybe, I mean, simplistic way for a long interview. But I think you could make arguments towards journalistic quality for sure. I mean, maybe not investigative, but that's a very specific kind of journalism.
Mm.
And I know one of my favorite things that ever happened to me at American University of Sharjah was during the exhibition with that you had with the students with the posters
Right.
and the removing of certain imagery that was censored beyond your control. And I'm curious if you want to talk about that story and the idea of censorship with independent media versus maybe legacy media.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in that specific case, it was kind of interesting because task that I gave to the students was working on the subject crossing the line, knowing that at that time, we worked on silkscreen posters that, of course, in the context of a country with many religions and with like the UAE and with this kind of shifts between very traditional and very modern lives. And there are a lot of borders that you are allowed not to cross. And I found it very interesting to see how the students already went into some kind of censorship, but then also with the of youth, they crossed a few borders that then, from the perspective of the gallerist or of the museum, were going too far. And the nice thing is that for me, I did not feel offended at all, because exactly the same even happens here in Germany, in a country where I had already this experience of being censored by museum institutions for the work that I'm doing here. So it comes that I have here also poster exhibitions and museums, and probably you have heard of it that in the very recent times, it happens even more often that people are not even getting invited if they have a background that might be a little bit Iranian or Muslim or this or that. You know, we are living in times where already a lot of art is not visible just because the institution doesn't want to go through a political discussion where you could easily question why, if not there, why, if this, in my opinion, of course, is the place where art should be, or this is where political discussion should happen. It is in the center of arts and in the center of any arts, if it's dancing or playing or whatever. So the censorship, I think, is something that we are facing all the time at the moment. It's our role to be smart and to navigate through it, though it is extremely difficult. I mean, we get every time we got so often censored by social media for our content, because they have these kind of automatic algorithm driven codex that is absolutely not contextualizing, or it's not bringing things into the context. So of course, you get kicked out all the time, right? So we had a publication that we did on Los Angeles, and there was on the cover a piece that was a quote of one of my favorite artists, Ed Ruscha, who had this beautiful painting that I saw in the museum. They're saying Hollywood is not a verb, and we transformed that design into having a design just naming 3 very typical people that would be those people that you see in Los Angeles, to be provocative. And it was like nannies, cops, and porn stars. And just for having this, this one porn stars being written on the cover, all the social media broke down and we got censored for it, right? My printer is just running here because my wife is printing something. Just a sec.
Okay. That's all right. It's a bit angry. It happens. It has to do its job.
Yeah. So you see, I think we also, in our so-called Western safe space of journalism, we are constantly facing exactly these kind of issues. Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you get your journalistic news from today?
Well, I have the luck that I'm fluently speaking 3 languages, or my English sometimes is a little bit rusty, but somehow I'm really trying to read in the morning, like, all the 3, 4 sources from Germany, France, and UK and America. So I'm really, it's like this half hour every morning, just checking the news and trying to have a different perspective. I think it's kind of interesting to see how monoline kind of the German news is nowadays, especially regarding Israel.
Mm.
Yeah, it's very difficult to have a critical voice towards the Israeli government at the moment in Germany.
You're reading this on your phone, I imagine? Is that
Yeah, on the phone, yeah.
and so
Well, on the phone, on the day, and in the daytime, here and there, sometimes on the.
but it's always text. You aren't getting podcast or videos.
Yeah, it's always text.
Yeah.
Yeah, really text news.
Just curious
No,
as
I really love The Guardian. I think it's kind of interesting here and there to catch up with what French news are saying. Yeah, Swiss news are kind of interesting as well, what comes from there. I think the French have a much broader outer European perspective. Like Le Monde, for example, is much more reporting about stuff that is happening in Africa, stuff that you would not necessarily see on German news channels, right? And I think The Guardian, for example, in my opinion, is much more critical towards things that are happening in the United States than American news, though the New York Times somehow is also kind of interesting to have a look at every day.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I end up listening podcasts to most of
Yeah.
my news, like daily
hmm
check-in stuff.
hmm
Although I do sometimes get the Guardian on
Yeah.
pops up on my social media feeds.
I'm more like a reading guy.
Yeah. That's I think I use it as what I do during transition time, like
Yeah.
shower and
Yeah, and
change.
we have a subscription of a really good German weekly newspaper. It's called Freitag, so Friday, and yeah, they have a really good, very neutral. Well, not really neutral. They're a little bit more lefty, but they are kind of smart. Yeah.
Are they the news you're looking at is legacy news, not like you aren't getting like news, like listserv newsletters sort of stuff in your email?
I have a few newsletters, but to be honest, I stopped subscriptions of newsletters as much as possible just because of all the other activities that I'm running. That for me, the email really became like a purely business oriented way of communication. And the newsletter thing, yeah, it's not resonate to me personally because I have so many emails that I get on a daily basis that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. How important is especially if we're looking from an independent creator perspective, how important is branding?
Well, branding is, in my opinion, talking about design, one of the few safe spaces to earn money. From that perspective, it's good to work on branding projects. And from the purely design perspective, I think that branding became really interesting because the product itself is not so much different anymore. It is more the story behind the product. And that's where branding really starts to become very interesting. So how could you enhance something that is very similar to something else with a good story, right? So definitely looking at products or services or food or whatever. I mean, everything is not unique anymore. So it is about creating a unique story around something. And that, of course, is a turf that for designers can be a very interesting one.
Have you kind of thought about how this may play out in the next 10 years?
Constantly it stresses me because I mean, in the sense of same as you, we are teaching students to be prepared for something that we do not really know what is going to be happening. But
Yeah.
I'm probably also, I feel a little bit privileged that I started entering business in a time where there were no computers, or not computers as we have them now. And that, yeah, all these old farts, when I looked at them, I said, well, yeah, guys, yeah, this is the new thing, and we're taking over the power now, our generation. And now I'm part of these old farts. But the story is somehow that I mean, the change from no computers to computers was really big, and probably now the next change from non-AI to AI will also be very big. But we've been already also, I think, through this change of no social media to too much social media, and here and there I see already that there is a contra movement happening here and there. That I mean, some kids now are once they are becoming adults, they don't see the need anymore to be on social media and understand that it makes no real human value. And so I'm pretty much confident on that side. I'm very much confident on the side of printing and paper making that this is something that you clearly see, that the amount of, especially in Europe, the amount of mailings that are being sent physically to customers is increasing, and the quality is increasing a lot. You see it in other countries much more than you see it here. For example, in Korea, that the music industry is totally focused on producing printed ephemera or printed books, and really beautiful stuff coming along with each release of a record. So there are markets in which this kind of old school world somehow is working very sustainable. And I believe that it's always about creating a momentum of sustainability in a way, though as soon as financially something is cool, then it's bulletproof, right? So unfortunately we lost a little bit this momentum now due to all the problems that we have in the world with ecological issues. But it was at some point, we hoped that ecology would be like something that could be sold to the market through arguments that were more coming from an economic perspective and less from an idealistic momentum. We lost this at the moment because there are the issues of what is happening in the US now seems to be more like fuck ecology, and but in fact it is a step back because it is a super interesting market to be developed, and the Chinese understood very well that this is the market of the future where there is a much more money being involved than in fossil energies. So always when it comes to, I think, a momentum in which you can prove that something has, at least in our capital systems, a value beyond the product itself, and becomes where this value becomes a economic success, then it's totally fine not to be with AI, and that's where I think is a potential. I see it also in the way how at the moment.
Hey, this is a non-commercial commercial, and the only break I'm taking in this entire podcast to make one request. If you're enjoying this content, guess what? We're not getting paid for this at all. So it would really help us if you would share, subscribe, follow, like all of those fun things that take a couple seconds, a minute of your time, means so much to us, and technically doesn't cost a thing. So with that, back to the show. Thanks for listening. Oh, I almost forgot. I also would love you to comment. Let us know what we're getting right. Let us know what we're getting wrong and what you'd like to see more of.
Maybe it's like just a bubble, but at the moment at the universities, students are totally into doing stuff with their hands. They love silkscreen printing and ceramics and dwelling and whatever. They love to be hands-on. And there is still a kind of, I think, this uncomfort that we are facing now with AI, and this uncomfort is going to be, I think, very, very strong, that we don't feel okay if we don't know that an image or a news or an information is fake or unreal. That is something that we as humans are still, it brings a great uncomfort. And I think it can lead also to the implosion of, for example, social media, that at the end we won't trust anymore these informations coming from social media, because most of them are not coming with a journalistic approven label on it. Like, and even in the German news, we recently saw that they published imagery that was proven then later on to be fake news. And they are just like, oh shit, we published a movie, or we published a video clip that was made by AI. We apologize for this news. And this happens every day by now.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest. I think you hit on one of the kind of not exactly discussed issue is what we're getting so sloppy, or things are getting so sloppy that
Yeah.
hard to know what to believe.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to you have to trust the outlet or the media house or the person, whoever is posting, you have to trust them to the effect that they're giving you something that's real. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But
Yeah.
my students are the same way as far as really getting excited about projects that have to do with their hands,
Mm.
handwork of some kind. So that's, I mean, selfishly exciting as a bookmaker. But let's see.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, the moment it's like we're in this phase, or it's not, publishing is not a luxury product yet, but it might get there. Who knows? Maybe I'm really wrong, and in a couple of years, yeah, nobody will buy a book anymore.
Well, I don't think that's going to
But I
happen.
don't think so. Yeah, it was the same with the Kindle or these reading
Yeah.
stuff. We all thought, well, it's so convenient. You go to the beach and you have your 20,000 books on your Kindle. End of the day, you prefer to go to the beach with a book. And if there's sun oil on the book, or if somebody is stealing your book, you say, okay, so what?
Those are my big questions. Is there something else that I didn't touch on that you thought I was going to touch on?
Yeah, I mean the one thing, of course, that is sad for me to see with journalism is that less and less big newspapers are able to have journalists being sent abroad. And I think this is something that I believe is really sad in a way, that the times where and then I also think that less and less have the guts to publish stuff that should be published. And that is the other part that I think is very sad, that there is like a kind of fear of publishing things that should be published. And I think that the big newspapers are somehow I would be interested to hear more about this from them. Why are they doing so, or why is it so? Yeah. And probably it has to do with economic situation that is very, very much connected to it. Who wants to see pictures from Somalia?
Yeah. I don't know that I'm not in the inner workings of big legacy media houses, but the feeling I get is, I mean, there's a lot still, many journalists and photojournalists who are losing their permanent jobs and going more contract, and the budgets are shrinking. And
Yeah, and you see it on the news now, right? So the pictures that we see now are super bad quality because they all come from some iPhones from just people being there, right? And so that's something different, right? So I understand it's the easy way to say, we just collect data that is there, that is on YouTube or whatever, but it's different, the real journalistic approach. Being there, seeing the people, talking to the people, making interviews, getting a broader understanding. Interesting times.
yeah. What do you have in your future? How do people find you if they want to see more of your stuff?
So right now we are on the verge of publishing in April a really nice magazine about tools, so digital tools. So it will be a publication putting light on all these crazy new little tools that have been developed to enhance any kind of design tasks, from illustration to photography to typography and so on. Because the interesting thing now is that, and that's a positive thing about AI, that it got kind of easier, I would say, to develop tools than it was before. And so for a whole generation of not so super advanced engineers or designers, it became possible to develop tools and plugins to other tools. My aim with that publication is to put light on on the side roads, so that we, take other paths than using and overusing Adobe and Canvas and and all these big guys out there, and to here and there switch to tools that are different, and by that have a different default aesthetics, because this is what's all about. How is the new happening? And the new is only happening because you hijack or manipulate tools, and that's what I'm really interested in.
I like it. So
Good.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you
for
so much.
joining me.